Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty radical.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Have you ever imagined, like, what if we completely rethought how, like, the big decisions get made? Like, forget Congress arguing about bills and all that.
Right, right.
What if we had, like, citizens' assemblies? Basically, it's kind of like a jury, right?
Yeah.
But instead of a trial, it's about shaping policies, laws, the whole shebang.
Yeah. And what we're seeing in all this material for this deep dive is that's actually a pretty compelling idea, especially when you start thinking about all the problems with our current system.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Like, you see how much influence just a handful of super wealthy people have.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's always this worry about foreign countries, meddling in our affairs. It's a bit unnerving, right?
It is. It is. And it kind of makes you wonder if there's a better way.
Exactly. And that's where these citizens' assemblies come in. Like, could they be the answer? Could they actually replace Congress? Maybe even, like, change how the presidency works?
That's the big question.
Huge question. So that's what we're going to unpack today.
Mm-hmm.
What these assemblies are, how they might actually work, and, you know, all the arguments for and against making such a massive change. What do you think?
Sounds good to me. Let's get started. So first things first. What exactly is a citizens' assembly?
Yeah, let's break it down.
All right, so basically it's a group of people.
Okay.
But here's the thing. They're chosen randomly from, everyday folks like you and me.
Randomly, like out of hat.
Kind of. It's like jury duty, but for, making big decisions about how we run things.
So, like, anyone could end up in one of these assemblies.
Exact. And that's a crucial part of the whole idea. They're super focused on making sure these assemblies are diverse. So you'd have people of different races, genders, ages, income levels, you name it.
So it's not just a bunch of, like, politicians or experts in a room.
Oh, no.
Right.
It's about getting a real snapshot of the whole population, all those different viewpoints and experiences.
And that selection process, that randomness, that's how they try to make sure it's truly representative.
Exactly.
I'm already liking this. But wouldn't that be, like, chaos? Just a bunch of random people trying to make decisions about complicated stuff.
Well, that's where the structure comes in. These assemblies aren't just thrown together and told to figure it out.
Right.
First off, there are limited terms. From what we're seeing in the research, it could be something like, say, 6 months.
Okay, so it's not like a lifetime appointment.
Nope, definitely not. They go in, they do their thing, and then they go back to their regular lives. And during those 6 months, they get a lot of support.
Support? Like, what kind of support?
Well, there's training, for one thing.
To, like, how to be a policymaker.
Yeah, exactly. They need to learn the ropes, how to analyze information, weigh different options, all that stuff. And then there are briefings from experts.
Oh, okay, so they're not just left to, like, Google everything.
No, they get access to unbiased, nonpartisan experts who can really break down the issues they're dealing with. And importantly, they get financial support too.
Ah, so it's not just folks who can afford to take time off work who can participate.
Exactly. That's really important for making sure everyone, regardless of their background, has a chance to be a part of it.
That's really interesting. So they get trained, they hear from experts, they get paid, but then, like you said, their term ends.
Right, and that's another really key part of this whole idea.
How so?
Because it prevents the formation of a political class, These folks aren't career politicians. They're just regular people who step up for a limited time, serve their community, and then go back to their lives.
Ah, so it kind of breaks that cycle of, like, people getting elected and then spending all their time trying to stay in power.
Exactly. It shifts the focus back to serving the people, not serving themselves.
That's a really intriguing concept. But, okay, let's get to the really big question.
All right, shoot.
Could these assemblies actually replace, like, the U.S. Congress?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And then even beyond that, some of the stuff we read even talked about replacing the presidency, too.
Yeah, I mean, some people argue that those institutions, as they stand now, are just not working the way they should.
And one of the big points made is about the influence of, super rich people and those big special interest groups.
Right, like, could citizens' assemblies actually level the playing field a bit?
Yeah, because right now, it feels like whoever have the most money has the most say.
It often does.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really struck me in the research was how our current system is described. It's almost like it's built to favor those with deep pockets.
How so?
Well, think about it. Elected officials are constantly fundraising for campaigns, right?
Oh, yeah. All those ads, the rallies, it's nonstop.
And that means they're beholden to their donors. They need to keep those big checks coming in if they want to stay in office. One source put it pretty bluntly. They said, The current political system incentivizes corruption by its very nature. Elected officials must constantly campaign, fundraise, and appease their donor class to stay in power.
Wow, that's a pretty stark
Right,
statement.
it is, but it really makes you think.
So the idea is that with citizens' assemblies, you completely remove that pressure. No campaigning means no need for huge amounts of money.
Exactly. And without career politicians, the whole lobbying game changes too.
Right, because lobbyists wouldn't have anyone to lobby, really.
Well, they might still try, but it wouldn't be as effective. Those assembly members are only there for a short time, and they're not dependent on donations to keep their jobs.
So the decisions would be more about what's actually good for the people, not just what benefits the wealthy few.
That's the theory anyway, and it's a pretty compelling one.
I'm seeing the appeal.
Hmm.
And it's not just about the money, right? There's also the whole issue of representation.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge part of it because, let's face it, most legislative bodies don't really reflect the diversity of the population they're supposed to represent.
Right, like it's mostly older white men making decisions for everyone.
And that just doesn't seem right, does it?
Not at all.
So with citizens' assemblies, the idea is that you get a much more accurate picture of the whole society. You have people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all coming together to share their perspectives and make decisions.
Yeah, because a random selection of people is going to be way more representative than like the people who win elections, right?
Exactly. It's like if you want to know what people really think, you ask a random sample of them, not just the ones who are the loudest or the best at campaigning.
And then on top of all that, there's the whole idea of making decisions based on evidence and logic.
Right, not just ideology or personal gain.
Because right now, it feels like a lot of political decisions are driven by, like, what will get someone reelected or what fits their party's agenda.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like evidence and expert advice take a backseat to those considerations.
It does. But in a citizens' assembly, you have a group of people who are there for a limited time. They're not worried about reelection, and they're not beholden to any party.
And they have access to unbiased experts who can provide them with the information they need to make informed decisions.
Right. So theoretically, they'd be more likely to actually listen to the experts and base their decisions on facts and logic.
And one source we looked at put it like this. They said that while current leaders sometimes act in direct opposition to expert advice for the sake of ideology or personal gain, these assemblies would prioritize rational, evidence-based governance.
I mean, it makes you wonder, wouldn't that lead to better outcomes for everyone?
Potentially, yeah. If decisions are being made based on what's actually best for the most people, rather than what serves a particular political agenda, it stands to reason that the results would be better.
And wouldn't that also lead to, like, more trust in government?
It could, definitely. Right now, a lot of people are disillusioned with politics. They feel like the system is rigged against them, that their voices don't matter.
Oh, yeah, I hear that all the time.
But if you have everyday people, your neighbors, making decisions about the things that affect your life, it could restore some of that lost faith.
I can see that. It makes the whole system feel more legitimate, right?
Exactly. It's like if the government is made up of people who are just like you, it's harder to feel like you're being ignored or exploited.
That's a powerful point. And then there's this whole other argument that I found really interesting about how citizens' assemblies could help protect against, like, autocrats and undue foreign influence.
Right. Like, could this be a way to make our democracy more resilient?
Yeah, because when you have one single powerful leader, it just seems like there's more risk of them being swayed or corrupted, whether it's by their own ambition, foreign powers, or, those super wealthy individuals we talked about earlier.
It's a real concern. But with a citizens' assembly, you're distributing power among a group of people.
So it's much harder for any one person or entity to exert too much control.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
And one source even talked about how this idea could be applied to the presidency itself.
Oh, really? How so?
Imagine instead of having one president, you have a rotating council of citizens drawn from these assemblies.
Wow. That's a radical idea.
It is. But think about it. It would prevent any one individual from accumulating too much power.
And it would ensure greater accountability, right? Because you'd have a whole group of people responsible for making decisions, not just one person.
Exactly. It's a really different way of thinking about leadership, moving away from individual power towards collective decision-making.
It's definitely a thought-provoking concept. But, this isn't just some abstract idea.
Right, like this is actually happening in some places already.
Yeah, it's not just theoretical. Several countries have experimented with citizens' assemblies to address some pretty complex issues.
Really? Like which ones?
Well, one example that came up in the research was Ireland. They used a citizens' assembly to tackle the issue of abortion, which was, a hugely controversial
I
topic.
remember that. It was all over the news.
And then Canada has used them to address electoral reform, which is another pretty thorny issue.
So these assemblies are actually having an impact on real-world policy.
Yeah, it's not just talk. They're proving that this model can work, that it can produce meaningful results.
That's encouraging. But I imagine there are also some challenges, right?
Oh, definitely. Implementing a system like this would be a huge undertaking, and there are bound to be bumps along the way.
Like what?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is continuity.
Right, because the membership is constantly changing.
Exactly. So how do you ensure that there's some consistency in decision-making, that you don't have things changing drastically every time a new group of people comes in?
Yeah, that's a good point. And what about manipulation? Could people, like, try to influence the assembly members from outside?
That's another valid concern. I mean, these assemblies are supposed to be independent and impartial, but there's always a risk of external pressure, whether it's from lobbyists, political parties, or even foreign governments.
That's true. And then there's the whole question of efficiency. Could a large group of citizens, even with expert guidance, make decisions quickly and effectively?
Right, especially when you're dealing with complex issues that require, in-depth analysis and debate.
So these are all things that would need to be carefully considered if we were to seriously think about implementing a system like this.
Absolutely. There's a lot to figure out, but the potential benefits are really exciting.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of exciting developments, the research also mentioned this new Global Citizens Assembly for People and Planet that's being set up.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. It's connected to the UN Climate Change Conference, right?
Yeah, copy 30 in 2025. It's a really ambitious project aiming to create a more inclusive and democratic way for people to have a say in climate policy.
It's a global issue that affects everyone, so it makes sense to try to get input from people all over the world.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that it's designed to work both from the top down and from the bottom up.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you'll have local assemblies all over the world, and then their recommendations will feed into a central assembly.
Ah, so it's like a global network of citizens working together to address climate change.
Exactly. And they're aiming to involve millions of people, with a goal of reaching 10 million participants annually by 2030. They're even developing a digital platform to connect all these assemblies and facilitate communication and collaboration.
Wow, that's a massive undertaking.
It is, but the potential impact is huge. The goal is to influence institutions like COP and really push for more ambitious and effective climate action.
And it's not just some idealistic project. There's real support behind it, including from governments like Brazil and Ireland.
Yeah, they're actually working to implement the Assembly's conclusions into their own policies.
So it's a concrete example of how citizen-led governance can actually work on a global scale.
It's really inspiring, honestly. And it brings us back to that fundamental question we started with. Could citizens' assemblies be a viable and desirable path for the future of democracy?
It's a big question, and there's no easy answer. But what we've seen in this deep dive is that there's a lot of potential there.
Definitely. The possibility of reducing the power of wealth in politics, creating more representative and accountable institutions, and fostering a more engaged and informed citizenry, it's all pretty exciting.
It is, and even if we don't end up completely replacing existing institutions, the ideas behind citizens' assemblies could still be really valuable in shaping how we make decisions, how we govern ourselves.
I think you're right. So here's a final thought for everyone listening. As you go about your day, as you encounter those big issues facing our society, think about how a system like this, a system where everyday people have a real say in shaping their future, how might that change things? How might it impact the issues that you care about most? It's a lot to ponder, but hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
Definitely a lot to consider. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
And to everyone listening, thanks for diving in with us. Until next time.
See you then.